Here's what's coming up on today's show.
Taking a lot more chances with your money as you get closer to retirement isn't always necessarily the right move. So you've got to weigh those options out and make sure that you're taking the right amount of risk that's going to keep you on track for your goals and objectives.
Hello, this is Mark Silverman, managing member and founder of Silverman & Associates, and I'm also a certified financial planner professional. I want to welcome you to the Saving with Silverman podcast. I'm glad you're here. Each week, we'll discuss different financial planning topics because making smarter choices about your money impacts the quality of your life.
Hey, starting out on kind of a lighter note here, Mark, we always talk about these federal crimes that are on the books. Some of them are kind of ridiculous, but you always got to keep in mind that these crimes were put on the books because somebody tried to do something or did something, and they want to make sure that it's not done again. So it's
understood.
It sounds kind of silly, but we're always looking out for our listeners. We try to make you aware of these federal crimes to reduce the chances of your ever running afoul of the law. And pun intended. It's a federal crime to play baseball without a permit in a national park.
I did not know. Is it only baseball? What if it's softball or basketball or football?
I think baseball is the only one that's on the books. So
interesting.
I don't know.
Interesting.
Maybe somebody had a baseball game spring up in the middle of the day, and somebody hit a home run or something and hit somebody on the head or something. I don't know.
You never know how those things start.
Yeah. It started somewhere. But hey, let's switch sports here, and instead of talking about baseball and running afoul of the law, let's talk about football. I'm a big football fan. I know you are too.
That's more my speed too, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Now let's talk about retirement on the gridiron. Now that we're in the heart of football season, and I'm having a great time watching these games. I don't know about you, but it's a fun time of the year for me. It's a good time for one of our periodic discussions about what we can learn about financial planning from the game of football, which I think is a great game. Well, first of all, in football, there is something called the red zone, and there's something called the red zone in retirement as well. And Mark Silverman, I'm going to leave it to you to explain those two things and what those two have in common.
Well, the red zone, I think it was in 20 yards, as there is a channel called the Red Zone, which you can watch a bunch of games, which I tend to watch on Sundays because you get a little taste of everything, of all the scoring plays. So within 20 yards of score, when they're within 20 yards, that's considered the red zone. In football, in retirement planning, we typically will consider when you're within 5 to 10 years of retirement.
Yeah.
Because you've got to button up some certain things. You got to look at see what, when you're going to elect Social Security, pensions, look at your numbers, figure out your budget, your spending plan, whatever you want to call it, figure out how you're going to retire, when you're going to retire, how much you think you're going to need. So the idea is when you retire, you don't have to go back to work and run out because you're not going to run out of money. So in planning, it's very important, and that's why it's important to do this before you retire. We have some instances where people tend to come to us after they've retired, and that's okay too. But we can ensure that you still can stay retired. But, it makes a lot of sense to plan before you actually pull that trigger.
And the one thing that stands out to me in the red zone with football and in retirement planning is mistakes are really costly, and it's important that you make the right decisions. You don't make any big mistakes. You don't throw an interception, and you don't have your portfolio just dramatically decrease just as you're going into retirement.
You're absolutely right. So some decisions you need to make can be changed, but others cannot be. So typically with Social Security, for example, once you've turned that on, there's a caveat within a certain number of months where you can pay it back. But generally speaking, once you take Social Security, you can't turn it off and turn it back on again. You used to be able to do that at one point in time, but the government caught on to that. Pensions, if you take it just on your life or you and your spouse, there's different options. Once you turn that on, that's done as well. And if you're invested the wrong way and you take a big hit, that could affect, retirement and when you retire and that sort of thing too. So you want to make sure that everything is in line with what your goals and objectives are at all times.
You're listening to Mark Silverman. We're talking about retirement and football. There are lots of things you can learn about retirement planning from the game of football. And I know you mentioned earlier that you watch this thing called the Red Zone, and you see a lot of exciting scoring plays and all that kind of thing. But, oftentimes at the end of a game, when one team is behind, you see them execute the hurry-up offense. And, I often say, somebody moves down the field with really good precision. They're executing sideline passes and getting out of bounds and stopping the clock. And sometimes I ask myself, why in the world didn't they do that the whole game?
The whole game, right?
Yeah, but how can you compare that to retirement planning?
Sure, and the hurry-up offense also applies to the end of the second half, too.
Sure.
But just to be specific. But to answer your question, I think the defense that they're playing in a hurry-up offense is different than they typically play throughout the game, too. So I think that impacts it as well. But in retirement planning, it's not being overly aggressive when you get close to retirement, especially with your investments, meaning taking a bunch more chances because you need to get a higher return. Like if you did so this year to catch up, it would have hurt you pretty badly. So you want to be allocated properly. What you can do as far as being aggressive is putting more money away, which is easier said than done, but being more aggressive with your saving and contributing to retirement plans, et cetera, as you get closer to retirement is a good thing. But taking a lot more chances with your money as you get closer to retirement isn't always necessarily the right move. So you've got to weigh those options out and make sure that you're taking the right amount of risk that's going to keep you on track for your goals and objectives.
We're talking about retirement on the gridiron. You can learn a lot of things about retirement planning from the game of football, believe it or not. And since we're both football fans, we thought we'd talk about that today. There is something in football called the victory formation, and Mark can explain that, but also in retirement planning, there's a time when you need to go into the victory formation. Right, Mark?
Yeah, so the victory formation in football is when you've ultimately won the game. You're just trying to run the clock out. So you tend to play very conservative, either running the ball or the quarterback kneeling down, that sort of thing. I think in retirement planning, maybe it's pulling back some of the risk. I truly don't feel you could ever get rid of all risk for the simple fact that, we're in an environment now with high inflation. There's not some type of CD or bond where you can put your money in and take no risk and keep up with inflation. It just doesn't exist, unfortunately. So everybody's got to take a certain amount of risk, and depending on what your time frame is, if you have 10 years, 20 years, 30 years left of your life, you need to keep pace with inflation. So everybody is going to need to take some amount of risk. How much risk? That depends on your situation specifically. So, but maybe you stop this phase of where you're contributing money to your retirement plans as you get close to retirement. And so it's managing it and protecting it while still keeping ahead of inflation is kind of the primary goal.
Yeah. Also, one thing that should become apparent to everybody if they're a football fan, and this certainly applies to financial planning as well, good coaches can make a real difference in football and retirement planning.
Yeah, I mean, it really does. I mean, and a coach, some people consider us a coach, advisor, planner, whatever term, but holding our clients accountable to their goals and objectives. So if our clients say they want to do this, this, and this, we need to show them what they need to do and hold them accountable and say, hey, if you really want to do this, this is what you need to do. And helping them, because a lot of people get busy, whether they're working or retired, people have their lives. So it's our job and our responsibility to make sure that we're keeping in front of our clients and staying ahead of them and making sure that they're aware of what the opportunities are. And so, a lot of advisors don't do that. More are interested in just selling a product, which tend to be very reactive and not proactive. And we tend to think that we're proactive in keeping our clients top of mind and making sure that we're looking out for their best interest at all times.
Well, if you would like a good coach and get a good handle on your financial situation, I would suggest you call Mark Silverman, and you can have a conversation with Mark Silverman, no cost and no obligation. And Coach Silverman, tell us what happens in that initial conversation.
It's very easy. So, Ron, he'll give out the number here in a second. You can call or text that number. If it's not a holiday, Christine will get back to you. She works with me, and she will get you on my calendar for a 15 to 20-minute phone call where we'll answer any questions that you have. You actually get to speak with me. I'm not going to pawn you off on somebody else. And be happy to talk to you about how we work with clients, find out if we're a good fit for each other. And if we both agree that we're on the same page, I'll invite you to come into the office and we can talk about next steps and that sort of thing. But nothing happens until you reach out. Even if you're not a good fit, I try to help everybody. So I'll try to point you in the right direction if we're not a good fit, or give you some advice that may benefit you financially, et cetera. So, but nothing happens until you reach out. Obviously, this year has been tough for everybody, so it's a good chance to review what you're doing and making sure that you're positioned properly for when the markets do recover, because they will recover. They always do, but we just don't know when.
You've been listening to the Saving with Silverman podcast. If you have any questions at all about your financial situation, please give Mark Silverman a call. Again, his number is 520-333-7601, or go online to savingwithsilverman.com. For Mark Silverman, I'm Ron Stutz. We'll see you next time on the Saving with Silverman podcast.
The Saving with Silverman podcast is brought to you by Silverman & Associates Wealth Management, LLC, based in Tucson, Arizona. The show is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and everywhere you listen to shows. Subscribe to the show on your favorite app today and never miss an episode. Just search for Saving with Silverman to find us, or visit savingwithsilverman.com to listen to past episodes, to contact Mark, and to learn more about how to make smarter decisions with your money.
Did you know that Mark Silverman also has a radio show? Tune in to Saving with Silverman Saturdays and Sundays at 3 p.m. on AM 790 KNST.
All matters discussed on this show are for informational purposes only. Opinions expressed are solely those of Silverman & Associates Wealth Management, LLC, and staff. All topics covered are believed to be from reliable sources. However, Silverman & Associates Wealth Management, LLC makes no representation as to its accuracy or completeness. This show shall in no way be construed as a solicitation to sell securities or investment advisory services to residents of any state other than Arizona or where otherwise permitted. Topics should be discussed with your individual advisor prior to implementation. Fee-based financial planning and investment advisory services offered through Silverman & Associates Wealth Management, LLC, a registered investment advisor in the state of Arizona. Insurance products and services are offered through Silverman & Associates, an affiliated company.